Welcome to The Landlady Listens. The podcast where we talk all things real estate, development, and the mindset it takes to build your dream life.
Okay, hey guys, it's Landlady.
I'm your host, Meg Hayden, real estate broker, new construction expert, and a believer in making big visions into a reality. So if you're ready to build it, dream it, and live it, let's dive in. All right. Have you ever wondered what it really takes to turn a vision into a thriving real estate empire? Today's guest has done exactly that. Welcome to The Landlady Listens, where we turn blueprints into reality. I'm your host, Meg Hayden, real estate broker, development strategist, and mom of two. So let's dive in. Today, I am joined by Paul, and you have a wealth of expertise and have been in the business forever. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your story.
Well, I started this journey back in the late 70s because my goal was to be an electrical engineer. And most of the companies at that time around, at least in the Northeast, that things were starting to die down and you couldn't really get a decent engineering job. So I got into real estate because I was an investor, small investor. And I got into the brokerage world because I figured out, or I thought at that time, that real estate brokers knew the deals, where the deals were before the public did. Mm-hmm. So I jumped in and I got my license and, eventually became a brokerage manager and all this other stuff. But I found out later on that it's just the opposite. The best deals are found by regular people, and the brokers find out about them actually last. But I went down a different career path from investing into brokerage, and then ended up owning my own brokerage firms and sales and everything else. But development, from a development point of view, we started in the late 80s when things were, starting to get going here in Rhode Island. A lot of Western Rhode Island was being developed, all those woods out there. So it ended up being an exciting journey, for lack of a better term.
So I invited you on the show because I know that you have a wealth of history about real estate development and you have some projects going on. So tell me a little bit about how you first got into development.
Well, as I mentioned, I was in brokerage.
Yep.
So I was making a commission in brokerage, and I was selling a lot of new construction for builders. What I did, I recognized early on in brokerage that the real money in brokerage is in new construction. Mm-hmm. You have to wait longer for it because you have to wait. It's not like a regular closing that's going to happen in 30 or 60 days. It may take months or in some cases
years.
Even a year.
Yeah.
So you have to have the financial wherewithal to, hold out until those closings start to happen. So what I did, I got the brilliant idea, let's go down to the city hall and just look for vacant lots in the tax rolls and then start calling all of those property owners. And once I found owners that wanted to sell their lots, I would then, at the time it was the yellow pages, I would call builders out of the yellow pages and ask them, would they be interested in a lot on so-and-so street? And this was nice because I double-ended the lot.
Right.
And then I ended up, listing the house that was going to be on that lot in the future, which led to people buying that house, having a listing to sell. So, that's how the ball got going initially. And then I figured out after a period of time, wow, these builders are making, I was making 4 or 5%, whatever the commission was at the time.
Right, and they're making 30.
And they're making 25.5%. And I said, maybe I should go down a different road and make the 25.5 and save the 5 or 6% commission.
Right.
Because I'm my own broker. And that's where we are today.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I first started, I did the same thing. I was like, the name of the game is really listings, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, if I work with developers, they're going to have multiple listings for me to sell. And not only do I get the land, find them the land, but then I get the sale. So I'm getting, you're getting 3 sales out of one deal.
Exactly.
And you're working with one person or multiple people. You're not working with every single homeowner that is, has been in their house forever and what have you. It's just, it's numbers. And then you're able to really guide people, guide developers to the best pricing.
Absolutely.
and also marketing the property.
That's right.
So you're going to the tax, you're going to town hall, you're finding the tax records,
Correct.
calling the vacant lots,
Correct.
calling the homeowners, and then when did you actually start building?
The building came later. The building came probably in the late 80s and early 90s because I had been in the brokerage business by then several years. And of course, that's, we ran into some economic problems in Rhode Island at that time. We had just when you get going, someone pulls the rug out from under you. We had the banking crisis in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a good lesson because I figured out at that time that regardless of the market, good, bad, or indifferent, there's always someone looking for new construction.
That's true.
And just like the person who's always looking for a new car.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who want to buy used cars, which is fine, but there's always that person who's looking for a new car.
Always a market for
my
it.
My dad was a perfect example of that. He knew he was paying more for a car, but he didn't want the aggravation and maintenance. He knew if he bought a new car, he'd get 5 years or 10 years out of it, and there would be absolutely, no headaches. And that market is always there, regardless of, whatever the economic times are.
Speaking of economic times,
Yeah.
what do you foresee in the next year or two in the new construction market?
Well, it all depends. Economically right now, we are at 2010 sales levels. Now, if you were around in 2010, and I don't know if you were, 2010 was just at that
Height.
tail end of the housing mortgage crisis that happened at that time. But you know what? Things always sell. And I always was convinced that, hey, look, I'm going to be in the group that sells and not in the group that doesn't sell. So
No option.
Whatever I have to do, if I have to work harder, if I have to, instead of 40 hours a week, if it's 60 hours a week, it's going to get done.
Right.
And that was always my mentality. I actually, believe it or not, I actually succeeded more during the bad times economically than the good times. Because during the bad times, people will take your advice. During the good times, it's like, well, you don't know anything. I can get 3 other people in here to tell me what I want to hear. So that's always been my focus is, I'm not worried about what the market is doing. I'm worried about the product that I'm putting out. And it pays off in the long run. I think there's going to be, especially with this new legislation that just passed, there's going to be more affordable housing. The towns are going to resist it. There's examples of that right now. You see what's going on in Johnston. I don't know if you've been paying attention to that.
Tell the listeners about
someone
it.
proposed a subdivision containing, a couple hundred rental units, and the town is fighting it left and right. But the new law, I think, is on the developer's side. I'm not either for or against the project. I don't have a position on it, but I'm just saying that the towns have historically fought new development. It's almost like, once I'm here, I don't want anybody else to be here kind of attitude. And that's what's really slowed down the new construction in Rhode Island over the past 10 years. It has nothing to do with the amount of buyers. It has to do with the restrictions that have been placed on developers in these local cities and towns.
Tell us about the legislation.
Well, the House and Senate passed a resolution and law that the certain towns who have less than 10% of affordability, they give you some bonuses. They give you some zoning bonuses whereby you can circumvent the zoning, and they call it density bonuses. You can actually put in more units per acre than you would under the current zoning, as long as the development contains an affordable component. So usually it's 25%. As long as 25% of all of the proposed houses or rentals are of an affordable component. And affordability, there's a misconception with affordability. When you go in front of a town and you say, I want to put an affordable project here on so-and-so street, the neighbors come out, they're there with pitchforks and torches and everything else, because they don't understand the definition of affordable. They automatically think housing project.
Right.
We're going to have a housing project. Oh, we've been living here for 25 years in those beautiful woods and everything else. No, affordable just means affordable based upon the income, the median income level of that particular town. So, for example, I live in Lincoln.
Interesting.
Okay.
I didn't even know that.
My son has a very good job. College educated. I put him through college.
Well done, Dad.
Thank you.
Was it worth the investment?
$75,000 a year, believe me. Anyway, long and short, he can't afford to buy a house in my town. Now, that's a town that he grew up in.
Right.
So the affordable program makes it easier, or at least it makes it housing available to someone like my son to come back to the town that he grew up in. Imagine not being able to go back to the very town that you grew up in. I mean, that's home,
Right.
And you can't do it other than living in mom and dad's basement, which he did for a while. That's really not how you want to live at 30 years old. Let's face it.
It's the median income of the town specifically.
Correct. And there's an 80% component, a 100% component, median income, and a 120% component. And there's different incentives for developers right now to build those 80 or 100% components. Rhode Island Housing is giving, I believe, $150,000 per unit as a grant.
What?
Now, let me give you the dirty details.
Okay, let's do it.
It's up to $150,000, and what it is that you have to prove how much the construction costs were, and then take the maximum affordable sales price, and the difference of the two, they will give you a grant. Now,
Wait, say that again.
you take the total cost. Let's say you're building condominiums.
Okay.
And the condominium it costs you $280,000 to build it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, under the affordable guidelines of my particular town, I can't sell that for any more than $350,000, because $350,000 is the maximum two-person qualification for a condominium unit.
$350,000.
$350,000. So
Okay.
the difference between $350,000 and $280,000 is $70,000. They will give you a $70,000 grant, assuming there's money available in that pool of money that the state allocated.
Which who knows, right? Who knows what's going to happen with
Well, right, that's it. That's
yeah.
it. So, and that's one of the risks that developers have to take. For example, I have a project right now that's 20 units. All of them are affordable. So I went in front of the town because Lincoln doesn't have their 10% affordable. I think they're at 6.5% or something. So we went in front of the town and we said, hey, look, we're going to do all affordable, 20 units, as long as you pass this. And we weren't asking for any density bonuses. We just took the land as is. And they did. They were accommodating. The planner was accommodating. The planning board was accommodating. However, we have to make sure that that grant money is still available. Right. Because if it isn't, all of a sudden the profit margins are not exactly what we planned.
Right.
So I think if you go full circle on this, I think the big thing is educating the public, which really hasn't been done. When they show up at these meetings, I understand. I don't want an airport in my backyard.
No.
I don't even want a baseball field in my backyard.
Right.
I like my little woods that I have behind. But conversely, we have to think of the big picture. We have to think about where the town is going. Schools attendance is shrinking, so they can't use the argument, well, if we have another development, there's going to be more kids in the school. Well, that's crazy because
It's not true.
it's not true anymore.
Right.
They're actually closing schools.
Right.
They're not building schools. Where in the 80s, when we were in the 87, 88 market, which led to the credit union crisis of like the 1990, they were building schools. We had to build schools because the state mandated there was only so many kids allowed per classroom. So once they got over that number, the cities and towns were actually forced to build schools. And of course, when you build schools, or do you have to build near a school? You know, a fire station or a rescue. So it's an expensive proposition for a town. But that is right now that's opposite of what happened in the 80s. So that's affordability. Affordability is very, very important. It's not, you know.
No, it's literally what your town and everyone that's making in that town, what they're able to afford.
That's right.
And I think that that's a huge issue right now, and it's going to be an even bigger issue going into the next 5 years is affordability in general. So I personally think that we are at max capacity in terms of what everyone's pocketbook can withstand.
I agree.
And we're seeing that in a lot of mortgages that are coming up after being paid with COVID money. So I think there's going to be a lot of inventory that's being pushed into the market right now. And I know that there's a lot of being built, apartments and stuff like that. So
and affordability is much, and I hate to sound like my father, but affordability is very different now than it was when I bought my first house. Because there's, like, the mortgage companies they'll qualify you at 30% of your income, and that's
50%.
Right.
Exactly. I have to talk to homeowners or first time homebuyers, and I'm saying, hey, listen, this is what they're gonna give you. It's 50%.
Correct.
You have to be at 30% or lower.
That's right.
You have to understand that there's landscaping and there's all these other bills and your utility bills, and then something goes.
That's right.
So I think that it's very important. My biggest belief is all about education, and so that's why I'm super excited to have this podcast, because everything is about education, whether it's even understanding what affordable housing is in your town. It means that you have to be at 10% within your town, and if you're not, then you have to welcome in developers that are okay with taking that risk.
That's right.
To be able to allow a prosperous community.
That's right. And the reality is affordability, and I don't want to go on with this too long, but things are different now. Affordability to a young couple now is very different to the affordability when I bought my first house.
Mm-hmm.
We had a TV antenna. Right? So we didn't have a cable bill. We didn't have internet. We didn't have all of these, Netflix and this and that. My son has Netflix, Hulu, you can name it. I said, but Andrew, that's like $200 a month. It's only $10 for one, but you're buying 20. That's, $200 a month that can be put towards a house.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. So it's wrapping yourself around and educating people about the affordability component and what's really affordable and what isn't.
Absolutely. So talk to me about some of the biggest obstacles you have faced with bringing some of your projects to life.
Well, again, it's usually the cities and towns. The planning boards, for the most part, are very open to the idea, but there are some cities and towns that just don't want any development because, they have to face their neighbors at the supermarket on a Saturday afternoon, and they just don't want to do it. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Right.
And that right now is the biggest challenge, and I think the legislation that was passed was meant to circumvent that problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think with time we'll see that play out, because basically right now, Meg, the shortages that we have now are based upon these municipalities denying a lot of these projects over the last 10 years. So now there's very few. You have to go out and look for loose lots. You have to look, drive around. I know builders that are driving around looking at houses up and down streets to have extra land on the side of the house, and then they'll call me, they'll give me the address, and they'll say, is this an extra lot, or does this have to be subdivided? Because, that's what they're down to now.
Right.
Because a lot of these big parcels are gone.
Absolutely. So tell me what the process is for someone starting out as a developer. What is, from the beginning, you find a piece of land, whether, let's say it's raw land. What are the steps that you have to take in order to get that to fruition? I know it takes a long time, years, tons of money, but just break it down.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is put your team together. You need legal, you need survey, you need engineering, you need biologists, wetlands biologists, because there's very, very few parcels in Rhode Island that are left that don't have either some sort of wetlands on them or ledge or something like that that's going to get in your way when you start developing it. So the first thing is to put your team together. I tell agents who always ask me, well, who should I use as an attorney? And I tell them, ask the attorney that you use at your closings. Go to the closing and ask your attorney. That attorney may be able to help you. Just figure out who to use and then call that attorney and say, hey, look, this is what I'm planning to do. Are there any red flags that are going on right now that I should be aware of? Same thing with your surveyors and the same thing with your engineers. That's step number one. Assemble the team. You can't win a World Series until you have a good team.
Right.
All right. Step number two.
We're saying attorney, surveyor, engineer,
wetlands biologist, and in some cases, you might need a traffic study done.
Yep.
Because that's one of the arguments people use who are opposing these subdivisions. So you need an engineering firm that specializes in traffic studies. Not all the time, but you have to have them in your little black book to call.
Right, in your Rolodex.
Right, Rolodex, good one. And the next thing is highest and best use. That's so often overlooked because I look for the obscure. I don't look for, I'm just going to come in here and blast 3 houses or 5 houses or 15 houses. Let's look at what's needed in the town. So you go to the town planner and you set up a meeting and say, hey, look, I'm buying the property at so-and-so, plat, whatever, lot, whatever. What would you like to see in the town?
Great.
Because the planners are the ones that are guiding where the town is
their
going.
vision.
That's right.
Right.
Every town has a comprehensive plan where they want to be at a certain point, years from now. So that's step 2. Before you do anything else, I mean, even before you buy it, figure out your highest and best use.
Highest and best use.
Yeah.
Oh, in a minute, I'll be right there.
So do that, get your highest and best use, and then, put your thinking cap on. What can I put here? What is needed? What's the expense? What's this going to cost? And then you just, you go forward,
So talk to me a little bit about the expenses if you're going to break them down. Obviously, we have our attorney's fees. We have our engineering costs.
Correct.
We have the purchase of the land. We have closing cost, building costs.
Right.
What else is in that budget?
The cost that's the most dangerous, that has the greatest mystery, is site work and excavation, because you don't know what's in the ground. It could look like a beautiful farm that grew corn, for many, many years, and you get out there and you call the excavator out there and he starts to dig and it's solid ledge. Or I've had it happen, you start to dig and it's in a former graveyard. The job gets shut down.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so the thing to keep in mind is that's always the mystery, is site work and excavation. Everything else is calculable. Electrical work, plumbing, mechanical, framing, siding, windows. I mean, you can get those prices by just sitting on the phone calling around.
Right.
Landscaping, so on and so forth. But know your site work and work with your engineer closely. Just don't let your engineer draw up a subdivision for you that the engineer wants. Work with an engineer who's going to value construction, because sometimes you can have a piece of land and the engineer, I don't know, raised the road bed 5 feet. Now that's 5 feet of fill that you have to buy all the way the length of the road. So little things like that, most things in construction are calculable. And the second, the last thing is time. How long is it going to take you to do this project? What's the market going to look like by the time you're done, when you're on those last 3 or 4, if it's houses, or 5 or 6 condominiums? Because that's where the profit is.
Is in the last ones.
It's always in the last ones. It's never in the front. It's never front loaded. It's always end loaded. So try to get an understanding about where the market's going to be when you finish this thing. I'm on my fourth subdivision that I bought out of foreclosure from developers who didn't calculate time and didn't calculate expenses correctly. And they just let them go, and the bank foreclosed, and I was out in the street, and I bought them to finish the job.
That's great.
So yeah, that's what you got to do. A lot of builders don't do that.
Right.
A lot of builders just, I'm going to make X amount of dollars on a house. It's kind of like watching HGTV. You never really know what the flipping people made in real money.
Right.
It always says, they bought it for $200 and they sold it for $400, and they're not telling you there was $185,000 worth of expenses, to get it to the $400.
Right.
So you never really figure that out.
Yeah. That's cool. So you've bought a lot of projects in foreclosure, which could be something, that would be worth it as a developer to look at the projects that people are working on currently and seeing if they want to be bought out.
Well, think about it, Megan, and not to interrupt you. If you're buying a project out of foreclosure, it's already gone through the town.
Right, like it's pretty
There's
good.
No more pitchforks and knives sticking in you when you walk into town hall the night of that first meeting, okay? The plans are already done. You already have some sort of either preliminary approval from the town, or at least master plan approval from the town. So a lot of that gunk up front is all done.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of development, there's so many ways to look at development. You can take the raw land, right, and get it to approvals, which typically people are looking at 50% of profit in that. And then you're looking at other people who buy the fully approved developments to fully build it, and that's about 30%. So I think it's it's just different ways to look at development and different times to be purchasing development. And what's really what I talk to with my developers is that development is all about timing. And so some of these projects that will take you 5 years to get to even completion. So it really depends on where you are in your larger scale projects to see where you're purchasing your next development, whether it's the raw land or the approvals, and now the foreclosures possibly.
Exactly. And sitting on raw land long term is a loser. And I'll tell you what. They used to.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that you're a loser? If you're sitting on raw land, you have to call me.
Sitting on raw land is a loser, and here's the reason why. Number one, you're paying taxes on something that you may or may not even be using, okay? Number two, zoning tends to get smaller with time and not larger. So if you owned a 10-acre lot, I don't know, in North Providence, okay? At one time in North Providence prior to 1970, there was no zoning. You can go in there and put whatever you want. And then, of course, it turned into, quarter-acre lots. Then it turned into 10,000 square foot lots, and then it went back the other way when the towns figured out, oh my God, we have to stop this because we got too many people coming into our town. We got to build schools and fire departments and all this other stuff. So then they started to go the other way. So what happens is that you end up being the last person in a particular area with a large parcel that the zoning has basically doubled or even tripled now, which is really not the reason why you bought that real estate. You bought the real estate for an investment,
Right.
to go up in value,
Yep.
not to go down in value.
Mm-hmm.
So we try, when we buy a piece of land, and when I say long term, I mean like 5 or 10 years, kind of, or more. Obviously, if you're doing a project and it's going to take a couple of years to come to fruition, that's different.
Right.
But raw land, just sitting on it. And another thing, I had a person a couple of weeks ago who called me and said, Paul, I have 27 acres in Lincoln. And I spoke to an engineer, and the engineer told me that I can get 20 lots out of it.
Mm.
And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, how much do you want for the land? He said, well, at 20 lots in Lincoln are selling right now for $200,000 a piece, so I want $4 million. And I said, well, that's $200,000 developed, not you have undeveloped land. You have $1 million worth of road. You got detention ponds and sidewalks and street lights and everything else, granite curbing and everything else. And, well, that's what I want. I said, you know what you should do with your land? You should build your house in the middle of the 27 acres and just call it like, you'd be like Ernest Hemingway. You just want nobody around you, and that's probably the highest and best use for your property.
Right.
Now I wasn't trying to be snide or sarcastic, but when you get a situation like that from someone who just clearly doesn't understand or doesn't care, maybe that is the highest and best use for your property. Just put one house on it, and you won't have anybody, and your driveway is a quarter mile long, and move on.
I love that. So, my last question. Well, I have 2 more questions. What would be the one piece of advice that you would give someone who's starting in real estate development?
Well, in development or in brokerage or both?
Development.
Okay, development, because brokerage, it's be social. In development, you have to learn the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers have to work. You have to put in contingencies. I always put in a 10% contingency in case something goes wrong. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be one of those developers who is being foreclosed on by the bank, and someone else is picking up all my work for 30 cents on the dollar.
Right.
So it's knowing the numbers. You have to know what things cost. That's very, very important. And the only way you find that out is you got to ask around.
Right. Right. My last question is, so what is the one book you're currently reading or would recommend?
Well, because I'm in the autumn of my life, the books...
I love that. The autumn of your life.
The books that I read now are mostly philosophical. You get up on that Maslow's self-actualization stage.
Absolutely. I'm there too.
But, books that I find motivating are the older books that I read years ago. Lead, Follow, Get Out of the Way. One of my favorites, and it's a very easy, simple reading. I used to make it mandatory that all my agents read it. Was In Pursuit of Wow by Tom Peters, and it's basically a book that just it basically instructs you to wake up in the morning and just be the best of whatever you are that day.
I love that.
And if you can be and he uses an example of a busboy in a restaurant. And all of a sudden, when you get through that day, you say, wow, that was pretty rewarding. And then repeat it. Just do it the next day and the next day and the next day. And usually getting someone to get in that mindset is very difficult. So it's kind of books like that I used to read, How to Master the Art of Listing Real Estate by Tom Hopkins, things like that.
What's your philosophical book that you're reading?
I'm reading a book right now on, it's actually Socrates. Ancient Greek.
Oh, like legitimate philosophical.
The real deal. The real deal.
The real philosophers.
Yeah. And, when you read this stuff, you get into it about 14 pages and you say, nothing has changed in 3,000 years.
It's crazy. I know. It doesn't matter. It's just people.
Exactly.
It's just people. So thank you so much for being here today. How can people connect with you?
Well, they can call me anytime if they're interested. I'm on the internet. It's Paul Vanasse and Associates Real Estate. My construction company that I co-own is Seminole Development, and my email address is optimism@cox.net. And, you just ask around and we can find each other.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on The Landlady Listens. That is our show for today. We are here where we turn our visions into reality, and remember that success starts in the mind before it ever shows up in your life. Keep believing, keep building, and most importantly, keep taking action. Until next time, trust the process, bet on yourself, and go create the life that you deserve. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. We are out today. My name is Meg Hayden, real estate broker. If you guys have any questions, feel free to give me a call, 609-598-2232. Again, thank you for tuning in. Bye. Thank you.
Done deal.
Yeah. That's it for today's episode of The Landlady, where we turn your vision into a reality. Remember, success starts in your mind before it ever shows up in your life. Keep believing, keep building, and more importantly, keep taking action. And until next time, trust the process, bet on yourself, and go create the life that you deserve. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Love you.